What is good, everyone? So for today's video I wanted to do a little trap tutorial on Ableton. This is something you could do on any DAW, whatever you've got. I mean, you could do this on Ableton Lite, I think it's Ableton Intro now, whatever the hell it's called, on GarageBand even. Anything that's, you could use it on any free or cheap DAW, to be honest. I mean, so with Ableton Lite it's up to 8 channels, so with what I've got now is about 6, 7. So I prepared one earlier, the video corrupted or the audio distorted, so this is what I prepared earlier. But let's have a look at Ableton. So we've got 4 main components to our beat. We're just going to do an 8-bar loop, which you can structure later on. You can do it to your taste or whatever structure you want to make, or to a rapper or singer's taste, but we're focusing on the 8-bar element. So our 4 main important factors are chords, melody, drums, and 808. What we're going to look at is using just our free plugins, the ones that are included in Ableton, and we're going to use sample packs. So you can do this with free sample packs, paid sample packs. I've used paid ones, but you can do this with any sample pack. So first let's look at our chords. So I'm going to turn off all of my plugins. I'm going to group it and turn it off so we can listen to every single element raw. So let's start off with our piano, with our chords. So very simple, 4 chords repeated, and I've added some plugins to it. The utility isn't really doing anything, I just always have it there in case I need to change the volumes. So quick tip, if you want to add easy elements, have your template preset to adding a utility, an EQ and a limiter, just to get the bar rolling. So I've added a bit of compression, a bit of EQ, not much to be honest. And with trap, the main, for me, the most important parts while making a beat are the bounce, the feel, mainly the 808s and the drums, to be honest. Like the melody, you can do all types of melodies, all types of chords, whatever, but as long as your drums are hitting hard, your 808s are accompanying it, you've got a solid beat 8-9 times out of 10, to be honest. So let's now have a look at our melody. Also a piano, fairly simple, just faster, higher octave, so it sounds more in the melody than the chords are, so it distinguishes itself a little bit more. The key is in C# minor. Most times when you get packs, the key is correct, but just to check it, you can extract or convert the harmony, if it's chords, to MIDI track. And usually Ableton's pretty good at sussing out what's happening, what keys are being used, and with that it helps. But there are paid plugins that help find out the key as well, which is quite useful. There are other methods as well, but mainly you can find out from just the free, just from what's included in Ableton. So now let's look at our drums. So I'll do the whole drums together. So 3 main elements really in trap: kick, hi-hat and clap. For the clap, you want it fairly simple on 2 and 4 on the 3rd beat of the bar, just because it's a comfort thing for the audience, something that is easy to understand and feels good. Fairly simple, you know. Like the hi-hat, I've done a little bit of variation. It's mainly a 2-step, which is just 8th notes or quavers, depending on what terminology you prefer. Adding triplets here and there in the odd roll, so I'll make that bigger. So zoom to clip. Then yeah, so I'm gonna, at the minute I've got a triplet grid, so in our 8th note grid you can see it's a 2-step. I've had a little roll here and a little triplet here. Very, very simple. Just to get the ball rolling, to be honest with you. So now let's look at our 808. The 808s you can have a bit more fun with. So as long as you know what your notes are in the chords and your melody in the instruments, you focus on the root notes of each chord really for your 808, or bass depending on what you're making. But for trap, your 808 you're going to use most of the time. Yeah, you can use the root note, and what I like to do just to make things a little simpler is once I've found the key, I go into MIDI effects, go into scale, go if it's major or minor, you can just use these two. This is in Ableton 10, by the way. In Ableton 11, I believe it's even simpler. But yeah, so if it's a major, use the C major scale. It's not C major scale, so you put it in, or the C minor, and then adjust it to the key. With the 808, I'm going to take away the plugins now. I'm going to group them and make them go. Basically, the easiest thing to do, and what tends to work most of the time, is having the 808 follow your kicks, so they blend together as they're both low frequencies, and add that punch and layering and wall of sound that you expect from trap. So, I mean, here, as you can see, just from looking at the audio of the kicks and MIDI of the 808s, they're locking together all the time, really, just to keeping it nice and simple. As for the plugins I'm using, I'm making it a bit louder. I'm using sampler for the 808s. Once you put in your audio sample into the plugin, it always hits the root note in your MIDI piano editor and C3, so you can adjust that obviously, but that's just to get you started. Yeah, so then you just whack in you just draw in the notes you want. I mean, I've kept it fairly simple, following the chords from the root notes and whatnot. Not sure why I did those little bits there now. Quite like it actually. More of a bounce. Also for the hi-hat, instead of using sampler, I'm using simpler, which by the terminology is simpler than sampler. So I like to use simpler, then you just drag it in, and then the same way as the 808s, draw in your MIDI notes, as I've done here. Very simple. Then with the hi-hat, I'm going to just solo it, take away again the plugins. I'm only really using EQ to take away the lows, as you're not going to hear the lows in a hi-hat as it's high up in the EQ, and a drop of distortion, which helps bring it down a little bit in our EQ, so it fits a little nicer in the mix. It's not as high pitched, and which can make your ears feel tired after a while. So it feels a little nice. You don't need to do this all the time, but it's a little recommendation which I learned along the way. So let's take this away and see what it sounds like without the EQ, without the plugins. So it's a little bit tinny, a little bit high up in the spectrum. So we're gonna now add our plugins. Just brings it down a little bit and feels a little nicer. Yeah, you get the point. Bored with those little ads, those little bits there, so I'm going to take that away. Then I am you know what I've done? I've taken away the, because now it's repeating and it was an 8 bar, not a 4 bar, so I'm now going to have to just turn off Ableton and restart it. Bear with me one moment. Okay, so now we're back to where it was. Yeah. So where was I? So I like to group each individual element of the drums, kick, snare, hat, put them into a group, put a limiter on it in case things are peaking. For the kick, I did a bit of EQ, a bit of compression. With your kicks and your 808s, you want it dead center, you want it mono, you don't want it to be panning left and right in the headphones, you want it to be hitting hard in the center. With the hi-hats, I've panned it a little bit to the left, the clap a little bit to the right, just to add a little bit of variation, but it's not essential. But you can, when you've got a much bigger, much wider composition, you want to be panning a lot more and putting things to fit nicer in the mix and all of that. So yeah, so the drums, yeah, kick in the center, hi-hat to the left, clap to the right, 808s in the center as well. So let's just hear, like, without the chords or melody, if this feels like a nice beat without any melodic element apart from the 808, obviously. In a way, the piano is adding the bounce, which is quite strange. Normally the drums add the bounce and the groove and the feel to the beat, but the piano in this case is adding a fair bit of bounce, feel. It's combining the two elements, the melodics and the rhythm and everything together, which helps create this feel and what makes a beat a beat. Oh yeah, so let's have a look at what I've added for the 808. So I've made it a little bit louder, EQ'd it a bit, brought up the lows, the highs. The highs add a bit more attack and punch to 808. The same for a kick mostly. You do it to taste, but yeah, this is just fairly simple. I've done it a little bit drastic. Saturation, I've added Ableton saturate to medium curve, as you can see. Dry wet. Not be fully wet because it would then can be distorted. Compression as well. To what compression does is, in the simplest terms, squeezes the sample or the audio or whatever, and brings it to the front more of the mix. Where without the compression, it can still be prominent in the mix, but the compression helps bring it to the front. Sorry. Similar to why that a lot of producers, when they're mixing vocals or raps, they add a fair bit of compression to add it straight to the front, so you're hearing it and it's more prominent and strong in the mix. And everything as well has got a limiter just to help not peak. This is obviously, you don't want to necessarily use a limiter on absolutely everything. This is the most like bare bones approach to beat making. Also, I want to point on making things more present, adding to the strengths of each individual element. So for the melodic line with the piano, as it's quite high up already in the EQ, I boost that. So with the EQ, I've taken away the lows and the mids and brought up the highs, which just it fits a little nicer in the mix. These are things you learn bit by bit as you learn to beat make and everything else and produce. It's all to the ear. Also, something very important when beat making is we tend to use our eyes more than our ears. So if we just look at the melody, it looks fairly quiet, but as it's quite high Q, high EQ, it tends to be louder than things that are lower, so naturally it's going to sound louder than things that are in a lower EQ. You don't need to have the volume in the same way, as it's naturally louder to our ears, similar to mid-range, where lower you might want to boost a little bit more, especially with cheaper headphones or cheaper speakers to balance out the mix. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. I mean, just reiterate, the four main elements you want are your chords, your melody, your drums, and your 808. These four things help you start a beat. You can add more and more things, or more elements, or more counter melodies, obviously your vocals, your raps, whatever. But as a beat maker, producer, these are the four things just to get you started with your beat. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that, and I'm going to do more soon, as long as the audio doesn't distort or anything else goes to pot. And yeah, all good. I'll see you in the next one. Have a good rest of your day or evening. Okay, bye bye.